Every promise is easy to make until the day it asks something of you. Most promises are forgotten because people stop caring, but some are forgotten for a quieter reason. Life simply becomes busy. Dreams become careers. Calendars replace conversations. Success begins to drown out the voices that once guided us. And before we realize it, the promises that shaped our character become memories buried beneath our accomplishments. Elias Carter would spend years building the life he had always dreamed of. People would admire his success. They would respect his integrity. They would call him a man who always kept his word. Yet there was one promise, the most important promise of his life, that he had quietly left behind. It had been made on an ordinary autumn evening, inside a small woodworking shop where the scent of cedar and fresh pine filled the air. At the time, Elias was young, hopeful, certain the world held endless possibilities beyond the little valley where he had grown up. His father, Samuel, had spent a lifetime crafting furniture with patient hands and an honest heart. Every scar on his hands told a story. Every worn tool hanging on the workshop wall had earned its place through years of faithful work. Samuel never tried to stop his son's ambition. Instead, he quietly prepared him for something far more important than success. Because before Elias left that valley, his father would ask him for one simple promise. A promise that would one day become the greatest test of his character. Elias expected his father to ask him to care for the workshop, perhaps to look after the family, or to visit more often after he left. Instead, Samuel rested his weathered hand on the unfinished wooden box.
"This valley has always cared for us,"
he said.
"Long after I'm gone, there will still be people who lose their way. People carrying burdens too heavy to bear alone."
He gently pushed the box toward Elias.
"One day you'll understand what's inside."
Elias looked at the plain wooden chest. It wasn't valuable. It wasn't beautifully carved. It seemed far too ordinary for such serious words. Samuel smiled. "Promise me you'll return when the time is right. Promise me you won't let success make you forget the people who helped you become the man you're meant to be." Elias didn't hesitate. "I promise." His father nodded with quiet peace. There were no witnesses, no signatures, no ceremony, just a father, a son, and a promise that seemed almost too simple to matter. The following morning, Elias packed his belongings. As he walked away from the only home he had ever known, he looked back one last time. His father stood outside the workshop, raising a hand in farewell. Neither of them knew it would be many years before they stood together again. The city welcomed ambition. It rewarded long hours, bold ideas, and people willing to outwork everyone else. Elias quickly discovered that his father's lessons served him well. He treated customers fairly. He honored every agreement. He earned trust before he earned wealth. Opportunity followed. One successful contract became another. A small company became a growing business. Years passed almost without notice. Elias married. He became a father himself. His calendar filled with meetings, investors, employees, deadlines, responsibilities. Life became measured in appointments instead of seasons. Every so often, he thought about the valley, about the workshop, about his father. He would quietly tell himself, "I'll go back soon." But soon slowly became next month, then next year, then someday. He never noticed the moment when someday quietly became never. What Elias didn't know was that someone back home was still waiting for the promise he had never intended to break. Success has a quiet way of changing people, not all at once, not through pride alone, sometimes through simple business. Every achievement opened another door. Every opportunity demanded another sacrifice. The business expanded into neighboring cities. Awards lined the office walls. Newspapers praised Elias as a visionary entrepreneur. Yet, with every passing year, the valley grew more distant. The old workshop became a fading memory. The unfinished wooden box disappeared beneath newer priorities. The promise was never broken on purpose. It was simply buried beneath the noise of a successful life. Then, one ordinary afternoon, a small package arrived at his office. There was no return address. Inside rested a worn brass key and a single handwritten note.
"It's time to come home."
Elias stared at the familiar handwriting. His heart sank. For the first time in many years, he remembered every word of the promise. Elias turned the brass key over in his trembling hand. It was worn smooth by years of use. He recognized it instantly. It had once hung beside the workshop door, always within his father's reach. Somehow, seeing that small key unsettled him more than any letter ever could. Meetings suddenly felt unimportant. Contracts no longer held his attention. Numbers blurred across his desk as memories he had buried for years quietly returned. Before sunset, Elias canceled every appointment for the week. His staff watched in surprise. They had never known him to leave important business unfinished. As the city disappeared behind him, mile after mile of open countryside replaced busy highways. The familiar hills slowly came into view. Everything looked smaller than he remembered, yet every landmark awakened another forgotten memory. The old bridge, the winding stream, the fields where he had once run as a boy. For the first time in years, success felt strangely far away. But one question echoed louder with every mile. Why now? Why had someone waited all these years before sending the key? The workshop still stood. Time had weathered its walls, paint had faded, the garden had grown wild, but the building itself remained strong. Elias stepped onto the porch with a heart heavier than when he had arrived. Slowly, he slid the brass key into the old lock. The door opened with a long, tired creak. Dust drifted through beams of afternoon sunlight. Every tool remained exactly where his father had left it. It felt as though the workshop had simply been waiting. In the center of the room sat the unfinished wooden box, untouched. Elias knelt beside it. For years he had imagined something valuable might be hidden inside. Gold, family heirlooms, important documents. Instead, he found hundreds of neatly folded letters. Each one carried the name of someone from the valley. Widows, farmers, children, families facing difficult seasons. Resting on top was one final envelope addressed only to him. His hands trembled as he opened it. The handwriting was unmistakable. It was his father's.
My son, if you're reading this, life probably became everything I hoped it would for you.
Tears gathered in Elias's eyes. He continued reading.
Years ago, you promised that if God ever blessed your work, you would return and help carry the burdens of those who once carried yours. Not because they asked, but because gratitude should always travel home.
Elias closed his eyes. Every word of that evening returned with painful clarity. He hadn't broken the promise through cruelty. He had simply allowed success to speak louder than gratitude. At the bottom of the letter, his father had written one final sentence.
The promise is still waiting, if your heart is.
Elias folded the letter carefully. He knew exactly what he had to do. The only question left was what it would cost. Returning to the city, Elias called an emergency meeting. His executives expected another expansion announcement. Instead, Elias shared a different decision. Several major projects would be postponed. A significant portion of the company's resources would be redirected to rebuilding the valley that had once given him his beginning. Silence filled the boardroom. Some believed he had lost perspective. Others warned investors would walk away. One executive quietly asked, "Is this really worth risking everything you've built?" Elias looked out the window before answering. "No," he paused. "It's worth remembering why I built it in the first place." For the first time in many years, profit was no longer making his decisions. His promise was. Within weeks, construction crews arrived in the valley, but they weren't there to build luxury homes or expensive resorts. They came to restore what time had quietly taken away. The old workshop was carefully repaired, not replaced. Its weathered beams were strengthened. Its worn floors were restored. Every tool that could still be used found its place once again. Soon, the workshop opened its doors to anyone willing to learn. Young apprentices stood beside retired craftsmen. Skills that had nearly disappeared were passed from one generation to the next. The letters inside the wooden box were no longer forgotten. One by one, Elias visited every family his father had written about. Some needed repairs to their homes, some needed work. Others simply needed someone to believe they hadn't been forgotten. Every visit fulfilled another part of the promise. Yet the greatest surprise wasn't what Elias gave away. It was what slowly returned to him. Months passed. The valley began to change. Children once eager to leave now stayed to learn a trade. Empty buildings echoed with the sound of work once again. Neighbors who had slowly drifted apart found reasons to gather. The workshop became more than a place where wood was shaped. It became a place where lives were rebuilt. One afternoon, a young apprentice handed Elias a small wooden box. It looked remarkably familiar.
"I made this,"
the boy said with a proud smile.
"One day I'll teach someone else, just like you taught me."
Elias carefully opened the lid. Inside lay a folded piece of paper. In careful handwriting were the words, "Some promises don't end with one person." Elias smiled through quiet tears. For years he believed success had been measured by the buildings he owned, the awards he received, and the wealth he accumulated. Standing inside his father's restored workshop, he finally understood that the greatest legacy is never something we leave behind. It's something we pass on. Years later, visitors would often ask how the little workshop became the heart of the valley once again. Few knew the entire story. Fewer still knew about the forgotten promise that had changed everything. Elias never spoke much about his success, but whenever someone asked what mattered most in life, he would quietly smile and glance toward the old wooden box resting on a shelf nearby. Then he would say,
"The promises that shape your future are rarely the ones everyone hears. They're the quiet promises you make when no one is watching, and the ones you choose to keep when it would be easier to walk away."
Because a forgotten promise doesn't disappear with time. It waits patiently for the moment your character is ready to remember. And in the end, the strongest foundation we leave behind isn't built from success. It's built from the promises we faithfully keep. Moral: true integrity is revealed not by the promises we make, but by the promises we faithfully keep, especially when keeping them requires sacrifice. Every story leaves a lesson. Every lesson leaves a choice. If today's story stayed with you, subscribe to Motivating Morals. Until our next story, keep choosing wisdom.